Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Connecting with the Coaches. We've got our coaches from Carrie O'Toole Ministries here today, and we're going to talk with you a little bit about the idea of moms in an adoptive situation, especially when the child is coming from a very traumatic beginning. And all kids have trauma. Any child who is available to be adopted, adoption is trauma. But some kids have more trauma than others, and some kids it's more chronic than others. And so the moms in these situations, many times there's a term out there called the nurturing enemy. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So kind of the gist of that is that whatever happened to these children early on, whether it was they felt like their biological mom had abandoned them, or there was abuse, or there was neglect, or maybe there's mental illness or addiction or whatever caused them to need to be adopted. Now, a lot of times the kids are pre-verbal, meaning they can't even voice what's going on inside them. So it comes out through behavior. And the new mom is typically the more nurturer of the parents, especially if in a traditional family, and not all kids are adopted into a traditional family, but many times dad is more the provider and he's going to work every day, and mom, especially if she's a stay-at-home or mom or needed to become a stay-at-home mom because of the trauma, she's typically more the nurturer. And that nurturing just is so hard for kids with trauma because it takes them back in their nervous system, I guess we could say, to a place of abandonment. And that's what nurture meant, was either abandonment, abuse, neglect. Anyway, it's something horrible. And these kids will do anything in their power to prevent that from happening again. So let's talk about being the nurturing enemy, because we've all been it. What was that like for what are you guys seeing in your clients?
Mhm. One thing that I noticed early on in our situation was that our former daughter would appear to be comfortable with physical um, affection or hugs or whatever from people outside of the family. And so early on, I kept thinking, well, maybe she eventually will with me, but it never happened. So what you just said read true in our situation, because, you know, I wanted to parent her and nurture her like I did my other children. And when you have children before adopting, that's just sort of like this natural thing that you compare it to. But like you said, it's the exact opposite of what they want. And so the more you try, it feels like the more they push away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I always remember watching her with other people, whether it was extended family or people in the community. And she, hop right up onto their lap and look very comfortable in that public setting. And then I just remember, watching that and thinking, it just sometimes doesn't seem right. Like, why can't that feel like that for me?
Well, and if we think about it too, if you have a child who's attached,
Mm-hmm.
they don't go jumping up into strangers' laps
No.
and extended family that they just met,
Mm-hmm.
and teachers and coaches and people at church, and they don't do that. They hide. They come and hide behind. I remember even I was told this when I was like 3 or 4. We met some new neighbors, and I remember I was told I was hiding under my mom's skirt,
Oh, yeah.
just trying to be right there. And so that's not normal. That's
Yeah.
not healthy. It's not attached behavior
Yes.
to run and jump into the laps of strangers,
Right.
but not be able to do it with mom. It's totally backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. But not
Yeah.
knowing all that in the beginning, you're comparing it to like, it must be me.
Well, and don't you see that's part of the lack of training in.
Mhm.
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, go off, Amy. Tell us about that.
just the whole idea that, we didn't know.
We didn't
Like,
know.
you're just like in total, it's total shock and awe. Just some kind of war fog, family war fog, so to say, from my military life. But it's just, you don't know what you're looking at. It makes absolutely no sense. Nobody told us to think about this. I mean, we think it's attachment. I mean, that's, I think, where our first mind goes to. Okay, our first thought is, okay, this is attachment, and okay. And like you said, they're going to start far away, but then eventually I'm going to prove that I'm trustworthy, and they're going to believe it, and they're going to end up in my lap. And so we spend 5, 6, 7 years trying to,
Well, and also
thinking that we can do it.
it's not
It's
just
about,
about, we're giving one situation, like
Yes.
about the physical, you know,
Yeah.
reciprocity.
Right.
That's not the only issue. I mean, for anybody
No.
just listening to
No.
this for the first time, that's one symptom, that's one thing. So anyway, Amy, keep going. I just wanted to make
I
sure people
just,
knew.
yeah, I wish that we had better education for the breadth of what you're bringing into your home. Like, I just think that it's just not enough. It's just not enough.
Mhm.
And then, for us, we adopted siblings, and so everything that you're seeing with one child, then you've got your biologicals and their interactions and all of that. Well, then for us, we had additional sibling, and their pre-developed, really was a trauma bond for them. And you've got how they manage their new siblings and you. And so, I mean, for us, it was just so convoluted, to where the older one, I think we would have been fine if they had been separated prior to our home. They needed to be separated. They were not thriving together. They were both just like half a person, so to say.
Yeah, and that's a whole other topic, because adoption agencies typically want to put, and if we think about it, like in terms of normal attachment without trauma, of course you would want to keep kids together, siblings together. Of course you would. And it sounds cruel to think about separating them. And we could do a whole other topic, and maybe we need to do that. We'll do that in a future episode about trauma bonds, where we can really dig into that and say, what is it, and why does this happen, and why is it better sometimes to have these kids separated for their own health and for their
Yeah.
own future?
Yeah.
That's
But
a
back
whole
to the
other.
experience of the mom, in my situation. I had my biologicals who were becoming glass children, and I know they felt glass, but I saw them. My anxiety was all about, I just need to fix the situation with the girls, and then I can get my family back, and I can get my boys back. And the issue was, the older one really didn't. She was trauma bonded to her sister, so she had this love-hate relationship with her. And then she was also threatened by the biologicals, because she was kind of in that middle space. But when she and I were alone, it was like everything was fine. When we went to counseling together, they were like, she doesn't have rad. Like, my counselor said she doesn't have rad. And she didn't. I never believed that she did. But when we were all together, she was absolutely, I think, terrified that there wasn't enough love to go around, that the boys were going to get it, that her baby sister was going to get it. And she just couldn't. She couldn't sit at the table
Yeah.
and be part of us. Well, then, so we find a great family for her, and we are in contact. So I love this family. I just talked to the new mom this week. Like, it's good. I hate that it had to go this way, but it's good. Well, that's how we see the younger one for who she really is then, because now she has to have the attention, and she has to develop. She has the space to develop on her own. And this is where we see disorganized attachment and dissociated coping. And so this is a whole new ball game. But
Yeah.
we couldn't see it, because the older one was sort of taking up all the space with her outward behavior, and the younger one was not. So, this is the one that's got more problems, to be honest, and attachment and
But it didn't show
brain
up.
function.
Before.
couldn't even see it because she was the dependent of this trauma bond.
Hmm.
And now you can see, I just want to say too, like I've been doing a lot of research lately on autism. And one of the things that I don't have enough, I haven't had enough time or breadth of depth of whatever to be able to get into it in the literature. But I have a hunch. This is my like educated hunch on this. I have a hunch that we look at RAD as 100% like an attachment situation. But in my recent studies, I have this idea that what if we have autism there too, but it's not diagnosed? So let's say you have those with autism spectrum kids know that that attachment is different. It seems like one way, and they just can't, they're not verbal back, or they have their quirkiness, right? But if they're in a not triggered mom and they're in an attached situation, they are still, you can see the autism for what it is. What if these kids they're disorganized because they have autism, and it looks rad and volatile, because that can be a part of autism, but it's also part of trauma. And so they are mirroring each other, and they cannot make sense of it. So in the trauma spectrum, we would say, like, we have this disorganized attachment that turns into RAD, that turns into a personality disorder like borderline. Well, what if we have autism, and then we have this massive trauma that is unable to be digested in any form because it's happening to a autism brain. And so now we've got autism plus attachment trauma, and this is this is just overwhelming to this child. They cannot make sense of it. And for us in this trauma bond situation, it's literally the only thing that she had that kept her stable. And she wasn't able to transfer that to me after all we'd been through for those 3 years. And so that's a
Yeah.
long thing to go into about our attachment dynamic and how I was feeling, but I was absolutely overwhelmed. So this was 10 years ago I brought these girls into our home. 3 years in, we separate them finally. I'm another 7 years out now, with 5 years into a doctorate before I figure this out.
Yeah.
And I'm
And
not saying I've got it figured out. I'm saying
no.
I've had an inkling of like an epiphany that I want to look into that. So like it shouldn't take a doctorate and a decade to adopt these kids. We have got to get better information out from the beginning.
Yeah. And I just think that shows, because Jen, you're pursuing another degree. I mean, I got my master's after we had placed our son in his new home because we wanted to figure it out, and we still haven't figured it out. And so, what we have figured out is that parenting traumatized kids who struggle with attachment and will do anything in their power to keep you at a distance because that's the only way that they feel safe, it's traumatic for the moms and the dads. And so here we are kind of mopping up the families and the marriages, because there's so much grief and trauma that hits when you are a nurturing enemy and you never knew you were a nurturing enemy. You go into this thinking, we all have our reasons for adopting, and many of us felt called by God. Many of us heard about it in church and thought, well, you know what? We're called to care for the orphans and widows, and we have the room and we have the space and we can afford it financially and we've got the love. So let's do it. And we're taught that all it takes is love. And, if you have a room, then you don't have to be a millionaire. If you have space and you can feed one more, just bring them home. And that's all it takes. And we have just discovered, for me, it's 26 years. We have discovered, and actually, I've got a brother who we adopted, way back. he's 50 something now. And we've discovered that love is not enough, that this nurturing enemy
There's
thing is
way more
real.
to it.
And many, and all of us, I believe, all of us have been in some form of contact with our child's new families.
Mhm.
And, you know, what we've discovered, and it's all been a little bit different, but we've discovered is it's, you know, yes, some of it is us because we have our own trauma. And so we contribute some, because I know that my son triggered me, but I triggered him. And it was just this, nobody could calm down. And then pretty soon the whole family's traumatized. So I remember describing it as if, like, one person would do one thing, and it's like the response of other people is kind of like pitching a ping pong ball or something. And then because that person pitched a ping pong ball, it triggered somebody else. And now boom, 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 boom. Yeah, and pretty soon the entire family is in this tornado, and nobody's got a brain that's calm enough to manage that. The whole family's just in disorder at this point. And nobody knows where it happened, how to calm it down. Nobody knows anything. Nobody can help. And what we found is that even in our son's new family, this same dynamic went through, and they're an amazing family. And we were an amazing family. And we had some trauma stuff that we didn't even know was trauma. And then we're trying to parent this child with trauma. And like I said, the ping pong balls go off. He goes into the new family, and it's better for a bit because they're fresher. They're not all coming in all traumatized and triggered and wound up. So they did okay for a couple of years, but pretty soon the same stuff or actually it wasn't the same, because the things that triggered in our family, we made sure would not trigger in that family. You know, it was a different setup. It was a different, where the kids were placed and all of that kind of stuff was different. So the things that triggered him in our family were not happening in their family. But then he just kind of, you know, it was like he was a chameleon, and he could find different things to start acting out against. It's like, oh, those don't bother this new mom, so to keep her at a distance, I have to now do these things. And, you know, it's just amazing because these kids are coming from all over the country. I'm not just the country, the world. They're coming from all different countries, from all different, you know, some are orphanages, some are foster homes, some, you know, even in the US, we've seen biological kids that have these issues. We've seen stepchildren that have these issues, you know, readoption or marriage type of situations. So one of the things that I just wanted to point out is, like, every one of us feel this way. Yeah. Every mom. That's why they coined the term, this nurturing enemy. And it has helped so many of our clients understand that it's not just them. Like, Jen, if I had adopted your daughter, I believe she would have done the same with me.
Absolutely.
May have been a little bit different based on what bugs me and what doesn't, you know, but it's not you in particular. Amy, it's not you in particular. It's this whole idea of parenting a traumatized child, and then when our trauma gets exposed, we trigger each other, and it's off to the races.
Right. I always say, you know, I think that these kids, you know, if you get down to the ground level of this, it's like these kids have a hole in their heart in the shape of their biological mother. And I can't go that. You know, that's rejection at the very bottom level. And they're rejecting us because of what they've had to survive. So.
And really, before you reject them is.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So. Yeah.
And, you know, we all struggled with, if we place our child, is that causing more rejection? Is it causing more abandonment? And I mean, that's one of the wounds we had to heal. Yeah. And, you know, just having been out of this long enough, you know, and watching what's happened in other families and with other parents who have had to place their children, we've seen some whose kids have done really well in that next home. Yeah. You know, because we weren't, around.
Mhm.
Well, and because
Um,
we took out all the triggers again, like she's going to be the youngest. There's not going to be a baby sister to threaten her. There's not going to be a brother who's going to, we set her up they knew all the things that we knew in the first 3 years. So we picked somebody who didn't have a lot of that stuff already. So if they're going to be successful, they're going to be successful in the second home. And so she is, glory to God, she is. She's
mhm.
doing great. I mean, she has her trauma for sure. And
Sure.
she's, a teenager now. And so things have surfaced
Mhm.
that they have to deal with. And of course, with her sister being in residential treatment, that has triggered her. So they're having to, get her through that.
Mhm.
But she's not in a place that's triggering. And to be honest, one of the things that was triggering to me was that I couldn't prove it enough. Like, I do love you, and I did love her, and when we were by ourselves, I feel like we both knew we loved each other.
Mhm.
That was real.
Well, and that's that
but
felt
but
safety
how
thing,
but when we were all at the same table together, she didn't believe I loved her, and I was offended, and that
Mhm.
triggered me that I had to keep proving it, and I never could, because like you said, Jen, it comes from something I can't
Yes,
prove. And plus
exactly.
her trauma bond with her sister
Mhm,
and the experiences that she
mhm,
had in an orphanage and on the street, and it's
mhm.
just overwhelming. And at
Yeah.
some point you have to say, can I keep doing this, or am I good? For me, it was like, I just can't. I just couldn't.
Well, is it
At some
healthy?
point.
Is it healthy for anyone? I think, is the question that we need to ask. Like, I always ask my clients, is anyone living their best life? And that when they stop to think about it. I mean, I remember our counselor asking us at the time, and I'm like, we don't ever really stop to think about the life you're living or that your other kids are living. It's all the energy is focused on that
Yeah.
child.
Yep.
And so, no, of course, no one's living their best life.
I remember sitting with my therapist at the time, and this family had come into our lives, and he had been staying with them for weekends for several weeks. And we were thinking, well, maybe this could be an odd sort of arrangement. We have him during the week and they have him on the weekends, but the transitions were really bad. His anxiety would spike way more. He was having such a hard time at our house, but doing really well over there, which just was crushing, to us. But I remember sitting with my therapist at the time, and she said, "What do you need to have happen?" And I sobbed for like 40 minutes. I couldn't speak. I couldn't say it. It's like, I'm not going to say it. I can't say it. Like, this is just not acceptable. It's not appropriate. It's not, I've never heard of anybody. We placed our son in 2009. Facebook didn't even really exist. It was just coming on. We had no support. We didn't know anybody who had ever done this before. And we were just like, you can't do that. Like, you can't do it. But then we go back home. Our other kids at this point would not come for dinner. They would not invite friends over. My
Mhm.
marriage was pretty much done at this time. It's not now, but at that point, it was pretty much done. Could not see anything the same. And both of our childhood traumas were flaring up and causing all kinds of conflict. And our son was just checking out. He was just, I remember thinking I'd never give my child a TV. And by this point, it was like all he wanted to do was watch sports. And that was the only way we could keep him regulated. Nothing else was helping. And
Mhm.
we're like, what kind of a life is this for any of us?
Mhm.
And so finally I blurted out, we want them to adopt him. And it was just like, what? But
Yeah.
now we're working with so many families, and every one of them are struggling with these exact same things. And the fact that we have healed up as much as we have and continue to heal even to this day and will continue in the future, it shows that there's hope for everybody, and that the kids, at least he got a couple of years where his trauma was way down. And we
Mhm.
pray that gave him something,
Right.
to continue on. He knows, Now, whether he can accept it or not, he knows he has two families who love him and would do anything for him. The problem is he still can't take it in. And that's just so sad
Mhm.
to us, because any one of us, any of the four of us would do anything
Mhm.
for him. And that's just a sad part. But yeah, for those of you who are struggling, go ahead.
I was just gonna that's kind of the situation with the younger and the more dependent one. And like, what if it's cruel to make them live in a family where they're scared all the time? Like, at what point does it become cruel? This idea that we closed all of the institutions for the mentally ill, and that it's obviously there were things wrong with the system and it needed to be, but all we did was create another horrible system. And so, what if we had a better understanding that for some, maybe it's autism and trauma, and they literally cannot live in a family. That doesn't mean they can't live in a group home and be totally great and go function in the world. And I mean, maybe they
And
won't
just
have a
not be
healthy
triggered in
marriage.
that way. Yeah.
Right. And maybe they learn to have relationships from a distance. Maybe they're not the type that's going to get married. But is that so bad? Like,
Mhm.
why do we have to go, why do we have to do what society says or the church says? This is what family looks like. This is what marriage looks like. This is what adoption looks like. And shame, shame, shame if yours doesn't look that way.
Mhm.
No, I want out of that box.
Yeah.
And I think society wants out of the box.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you look around, we're trying to figure out how, like, where
Yeah.
is the right and the wrong, and how do we do right and wrong, but not in somebody else's what's best for them. I
Right. Well,
honestly believe that at the end of the day, this group home situation may be the best. My daughter, I have a lot of research to do yet, so I'm not there yet, but I'm still praying that she'll be able to fix some things, get to the bottom of
Mhm.
some things.
Yeah.
And we're working hard for that. But what if this is as good as it gets? And it's actually good.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just not what we thought.
Well, and
Right.
that's what we grieve, because
Yeah.
we had these hopes way up here, and this may be reality, but this could be good.
Mhm.
This doesn't have to be horrible. We
Mhm.
have to grieve this part because this is what we were hoping for. So,
Well, and so many families I talk to too say their kids, once they're in a treatment center or a group home, they actually do really well.
Exactly.
And I believe that part of that is because they are not put in a position to be forced to have relationships
Close
with
relationship.
right,
mother, father, or
right,
siblings. I mean,
right.
it's sort of like this living situation that works out well for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, we need to continue this conversation because I think we could go lots of different directions here, but don't want to overwhelm anybody. Listen, if you're one of these parents and we're speaking to you and you need some help, please reach out to carryotoole.com. Yeah, just contact us, and you can look around on our website to see all the resources that we have. We have a lot of free stuff. Go to our YouTube channel, look on the website under resources and find all the other Connecting with the Coaches conversations that we've had. If you find that you're drawn to one of us, reach out, because we all do coaching. And these two are way smarter than me. Amy's getting her doctorate in traumatology, and so she's doing all the research. And Jen, what's your second master's in?
My second master's is in clinical mental health. Yeah.
So they're learning all the most recent research, and I have a little more experience because I've been doing this longer, but they've got the smarts and the experience as well. So reach out to whoever you're drawn to, and we'd love to help you. So
Yeah.
thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time on Connecting with the Coaches.